tsunami, people just get together. Not only in Japan, everywhere from the world too, right? And still, the legacy is there. It's most big city are rebuilt quickly, and then like you said, all that materialist things are there again, and then most people goes for it, like forgot about everything. But no, actually, because even now it was election time, and then every party poster should said something about helping each other, or connection, or that's how the word in the poster, it would never happen. It never happened before, right? It was amazing. So it looks like same, but same again, but no, something there. People's, deep in mind, and then something still there.
So, in terms of next steps, this is the Supreme Court of Canada, Supreme Court of BC, right?
Yeah.
Right. So, do you know of other similar court challenges in other provinces?
No.
Okay.
No. They would have to start from scratch, pretty much.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. But if their cases goes ahead, they'll probably look to this as an example.
Absolutely.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. Precedent.
Yeah, this is definitely a precedent. That's usually how criminal code of Canada works and whatever else. Okay. So is the BC government going to continue appealing? Have they motion for an appeal?
No, right now I appealed and I lost.
Okay.
And so that has led to the inspiration of the Cross Canada tour. And then when I return, we'll see if I feel the recourse is jail.
Okay.
Because at this point, appealing to the Supreme Court of Canada isn't an option for me.
Okay.
Yeah.
How do you paint a good picture for them when they're thinking of all of, it's just going to our parks and stuff,
Well, that's why the notion of the municipal public tenting zones. Ultimately, if they have an inviting place where people can go, then they could have other parks where they say there's no tents allowed, if there is a reasonable place where tents are allowed. And
so the option.
the real job begins when we get that right, because that's when average Joe who's living in the tent city has to be smart enough to not let it turn into an internment camp, or a crazy spin doctory thing where the cops push all of the crackheads into one spot,
right?
And then they blame all the anarchist punk hippies for the stupid shit that their agent provocateur, whatever people are doing, coincidentally at the same time all the news cameras are there.
Yeah.
And so it becomes a sort of like the Wild West.
So that's where it's difficult. You think?
Well, that's the best picture. It's like, here's the alternative to all parks being taken over is a municipal public tenting zone, and that doesn't really need code of conduct or rules, because all the laws are already in place. It's in public behavior laws already exist. You don't, there are people who would suggest making a long code of conduct list or a charter for a tent city. At the same time, it would be a violation to require people to sign their name to stay in a place. Like that makes it not free anymore.
Yeah.
So,
So
it's the government's job to presume the best of each person. Like, there's a reason that cops are supposed to presume innocence. Because until you know better, that person could be the awesomest, most cool person that you ever could imagine. Until you know better. And so that's why you can't have arbitrary laws.
I think, though, that the issue of parks is somewhat of a red herring, because, well, I'm thinking of the people who formerly... What? Wait!
You can turn it around.
Here, let me get seated properly.
All right.
I think that the whole concern around parks is a red herring, because I think that if people had
the choice, the real choice, that they would not tent in a public park because people want their privacy. They don't want to sleep in a place where, people can see them, and whatever, right? I mean, I want my privacy. When I first came to Calgary, I had no place to stay. And my partner and I at the time, we thought about the parks because they were the most easily accessible. But I would have much preferred, a dense bush by the riverbank. And we thought about going to the Douglas fir stands, where there was very few people around at night, right? And there was relative safety. Because if you have, if you're in the middle of a city park, sleeping, who knows what people, drunk people, whether they're homeless or yuppies out on a wild night or whatever, stumble across you sleeping, and who knows what they're going to do, right? And so if people had the free choice to sleep where they could sleep, right, I don't think that many people would choose parks, that are open to the public. I think that they would choose areas that are relatively isolated, that provided good cover, and where they could be assured of security, at least through the night. And so I think that these municipalities and authorities that are throwing up this concern about, parks and stuff like that, it's like, well, respect people's right to sleep, don't control every single inch of land. I mean, the city of Calgary is cutting down the bushes along the riverbanks. And why? It's so that people don't have secure places to sleep, so that, people who choose those formerly secure places to sleep are now exposed, and the cops can find them and harass them a lot easier. Yet, if we left those in place, what yuppie is going to go crawling around the bushes on the riverbank? I mean, of course, there's still security concerns for people who choose to sleep in those bushes, right? But then there's other measures that we can try to keep them safe, right? So really, the right to sleep, does have its intersections with public parks and so forth, but to make it a central objection, really shows the authorities' agenda in terms of trying to not only control the discourse, but use it as a veil to deny people, a basic human right like sleep. Right. So that's my option, my opinion. And with regards to the whole debate around do we want refugee camps, in first world countries? Do we want tent cities, where all these disreputable people live and whatnot? Well, the only reason why a refugee camp is a refugee camp is because the broader society refuses to integrate those people into society and accept them as members. So you view, you regard a refugee as someone who is fleeing from somewhere else, right? But they don't have a place in your own society. So you need to have a separate place to contain them so that they don't become a part of your society. And if you look at refugee camps around the world, that's exactly what they are. They're open-air internment camps, right, that are policed, and you cannot go outside unless you have a pass. You cannot send your kids to school in the regular schools of that society. You cannot get a job, right? And you're basically imprisoned there, and you know that you are outcast. You cannot go home, but you cannot join another society, and that is what a refugee camp is. So if we start saying, well, we don't want these tent cities here because, we don't want refugee camps here, then what are you saying about the people who live in those tent cities, right? You're saying that, we don't view you as part of our society. We don't want you amassing, and creating your own community in the midst of our society, right? And basically you're putting people between a rock and a hard place, and that's why tent cities have to go, according to the authorities. Whereas we could view tent cities as just another alternative to housing. You can own a house, you can rent, condo share, timeshare, whatever, or you can live in a tent city. Why not, right? And everybody is an equal member of society, right? And we make space for each other. And in that way, you make the argument around refugee camps completely irrelevant. It doesn't even enter into the picture, because who is a refugee? Nobody. Nobody is a refugee, so why should we have to worry about that question?
I like the literal interpretation of refugee is homelessness. Like
Well,
a
exactly.
person without refuge, a person without a home.
Exactly, right? It's displaced, right? And displaced from where? Well, from a home, you know? So, anyways, I was a refugee. It's a very dear issue to my heart. But I'm not a refugee anymore. And why is that? Because Canadian society allowed me to integrate, right? And so gave me an identity in the environment that, you know, that I could settle in. Whereas if Canadian society didn't, like what we're currently doing to immigrants and refugees, just like, oh, well, we're going to detain them into jails and stuff. Well, you're making lifetime refugees because you're refusing to integrate them into, you know, into Canadian society. And so any refugee that comes in here, you know, basically faces the same risk as they face in other areas of the world where their children will grow up as refugees and they will die as refugees because Canada doesn't want them as part of Canadian society, and that's where we're headed. And
Awesome.
Sarah, you can stop.
That's good.